Hi guys, this is Miss Sierra, and I am going to show you a few examples on how to factor using what we call the swing method. So the steps for this is the first thing you guys want to do is factor out the greatest common factor. Okay, anytime you have a greatest common factor, you always want to factor that out first. And the other thing is if A is negative, meaning my leading coefficient is a negative value, you want to factor a negative out of everything first. Okay, then we're going to swing A to C and multiply. We're going to factor like we normally would. Then we're going to divide by whatever our original A was, reduce if we can, and then after you reduce, if there's still a denominator, you're going to swing it up with X. Okay, so our first example, we want to factor 9x squared minus 3x minus 2. So when I factor, I don't want a number in front. I don't want a leading coefficient in front of my x squared, so we kick him out. We swing him to the back. So now we have regular x squared minus 3x minus, and when we kick him out to the back, he's going to multiply. 9 times 2 is 18. So we move A to C and multiply. This allows us to factor like normal because the only possibility for an x squared is x times x. Okay, now I'm going to look at my last sign. I don't know if you guys have seen this before or if you use it. It's totally up to y'all. But if my last sign is in minus, that means in my parentheses they're going to be different, x plus and x minus. And if my last sign is a plus sign, it means in my parentheses they're going to be the same as the first sign in my equation. So here my last sign's a minus, so these are going to be different, a plus and a minus. And then I teach AM. I teach you add and multiply. And so I need two numbers that add to 3 and multiply to 18. Okay, and that is going to be 6 and 3. 6 times 3 is 18. And then I look, this is a negative 3 in the middle. So if I do a negative 6 plus 3, then 3 minus 6 adds to negative 3. And 3 times negative 6 multiplies to negative 18. Now, this is the part where people forget to keep going on swing method and just leave this as their answer, and that's not correct. So think about a swing. When you swing on a swing, you swing one way, and then naturally you have to swing back the other way. Okay, and same thing when you swing on a swing. When you swing back, you're going in the opposite direction. So when we moved the 9 to begin with, we multiplied. So when we go in the opposite direction, the 9 comes back and we divide by that A value, by whatever we moved in the very beginning. Okay, the next step says to reduce if possible. Well, 3 over 9 reduces to 1 over 3, and 6 over 9 reduces to 2 over 3. And then the last step is after you reduce, if there is still a denominator, and in this case there is a denominator in both sets of parentheses, we swing that denominator up in front of the x. So this becomes 3x plus 1 times 3x minus 2. And then remember, guys, you can always check. If you were to FOIL this out or tic-tac-toe it, you should get all the way back to what you originally started with. Okay, next example. We're going to factor 10x squared minus 9x plus 2. So same thing. I don't want to factor something that has a leading coefficient other than 1. So we're going to kick it out to the back and multiply. So we get x squared minus 9x plus 10 times 2 is 20. Okay, again, this is good because the only option for x squared is x times x. This time my last sign is a plus. That means in parentheses, I'm going to have the same as the first sign. So that means they're both minus. Now we're going to add to 9 and multiply to 20. And that is 4 and 5. If I do a negative 4 and a negative 5 and I add it together, I do in fact get negative 9. And if I multiply a negative times a negative, I do get positive 20. Okay, so now we have to remember that we were swinging on a swing and that naturally we have to swing back. So we're going to divide by 10. Then we're going to reduce if we can. So 4 over 10 goes to 2 over 5. 5 over 10 goes to 1/2. And then because there's still a denominator, it's going to swing up in front of x, giving us 5x minus 2 and 2x minus 1. And again, if I were to FOIL that or tic-tac-toe it out, we would end up with 10x squared minus 9x plus 2. Okay, the next one. same thing. I don't want a number in front, so we're going to get rid of it. And just so you guys know, this is the reason we like the swing method, is because the steps work the same way every single time you do it. So I don't want the 2, we multiply it by the end. Okay, A times C. 28 times 2 is 56. So now I put 2 sets of parentheses. The only option for x squared is x times x. The last sign's a plus, so it means they're going to be the same as the first sign, which is also a plus. So in this case, they're both positive values. Now I have to figure out what adds up to 15 that multiplies to 56. Okay, and I'm going to use 7 and 8. 7 plus 8 is 15. 7 times 8 is 46. Now we swing on a swing. Naturally, we have to swing back. And what we divide by is the number we swung to begin with. So in this case, a 2. Now here, 7 over 2 does not reduce. So for right now, I'm going to leave it as 7 over 2. But 8 over 2 reduces to 4. And so the 7 over 2 still has a denominator. So it swings up in front of the x. And then when I reduced 8 over 2, it got rid of the denominator. So nothing has to swing up. And my answer is 2x plus 7 times x plus 4. And again, you can always FOIL or tic-tac-toe and double check yourself. Okay, example 4. I don't want to factor with the 12 in front, so I'm going to kick them out to the back. X squared plus 4x minus 60. So when I do my 2 sets of parentheses, the only option is x times x for x squared. The last sign's a minus, so I get to put a plus and a minus. Then I need to figure out what adds to 4 that multiplies to 60. Okay, so 10 and 6 multiply to 60, and so I have to figure out how to use 10 and 6 to get to positive 4. So if I do positive 10 minus 6, that's a positive 4 if I add them. And if I do 10 times a negative 6, it multiplies to be a negative 60. So again, we swung the 12. When we swing on a swing, naturally we swing back in the opposite direction. So we multiplied first, now we're going to divide. If I can reduce, I need to. If I divide both of these by 2, I get 5 over 6. And then here, 6 over 12 reduces to 1/2. We still have denominators, so the last step is to swing the denominator up with x. So we end up with 6x plus 5 times 2x minus 1. Okay, 2 more examples. Example 5, 15x squared minus 9x minus 6. On this one, if you notice, the very first thing, and I haven't brought it up on the other examples like I should have, but you always check for a greatest common factor first. These can all be divided by 3. So the first thing we're going to do is factor out a 3. That leaves me with 5x squared minus 3x minus 2. Now when we do the swing method, we are going to do the swing method with just what's in parentheses. So I don't want the 5. I'm going to kick him out to the back and multiply by 2. So I get x squared minus 3x minus 10. This allows me to factor x times x. The last sign's a minus sign, so these are going to be different. Okay, and then to add to 3 and multiply to 10, it's 5 and 2. So I have to add to a negative 3. That means it's going to be a negative 5 plus 2. And then also negative 5 times 2 is a negative 10. Okay, when we swing on a swing, naturally we swing back, so we're going to divide by the first 5 we had. So 2 over 5 does not reduce, so we're going to leave it for a moment. But 5 over 5 does reduce to 1. And so my final step is to swing the denominator up in front of x, giving us 5x plus 2 times x minus 1. But the catch here is if you were to FOIL or tic-tac-toe that out, you would not get to 15x squared minus 9x minus 6. You would get to 5x squared minus 3x minus 2. And the reason is because of the greatest common factor we took out at the front. So we bring that down here and put it in front of my factored pieces. And then that is my final factored answer. Okay, and last example for this video. This time I have a leading coefficient that's negative. I do not want it to be negative, so the first thing I'm going to do is factor a negative out of everything. So I'm going to have positive 2x squared plus x minus 6. And then we're going to treat it just like we did the 3 we factored out on example 5. I'm going to leave it at the front and ignore it for a second. And I'm going to factor what's in parentheses. So I don't want the 2. I move him to the back and multiply. So x times x will give me x squared. The last sign's minus, so these are different, a plus and a minus. Now this time I have to add to 1 and multiply to 12, and so that's going to be 4 and 3. The way I add to a positive 1 is a positive 4 minus 3. Now we swung on a swing, so we have to swing back the opposite direction, and we're going to divide by 2. Reduce, 4 over 2 is 2. 3 over 2 does not reduce, so we leave it alone for a second. So we have x plus 2, it reduced my denominator away. I still have a denominator here, so I swing it up, 2x minus 3. But again, guys, remember, we factored out that negative at the very beginning, so I write my greatest common factor in the very front, and we have factored this equation. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I hope it's helpful, and good luck factoring.